Right. Well, I think the one person we thought would be here is Andy Smith, but I'm sure he'll jump in when he can, if he can, when he can. So thanks everybody. Another beautiful day that you've donated some time from, and I really appreciate it. So we're going to talk about processing. It may take the whole 2 hours that we've set aside. It may not. It's okay if it doesn't. A couple of things I just want to say up front. In previous meetings, when we've talked about processing, a couple of things have come up that have seemed important to people. So I just wanted to reflect that back. One is that when we talk about processing, we also want to be mindful of making sure that the processors we have are doing well, because they're important to us. And so I don't know if we might want to spend a little bit of time talking about if there's anything we need to know or do on that front. And that also, although it's not going to be the big answer, but it's really important to support on-farm processing, and that maybe there are opportunities, or we can create opportunities or the right kind of support so that current processors who are interested in scaling up and expanding could have opportunity to do that. And then the last piece is around talking about new processing infrastructure and what opportunities there could be. Are there gaps or opportunities that we can harness or try to fill gaps? And so those are just a few different ways we can look at this topic area. And we don't have an agenda, like we're not going to spend 5 minutes on this and 10 minutes on this, because I think we really just need to go where you all want to go. And I know that there has been some conversation in the background about ideas coalescing around new processing. But before we jump to new processing, because I think we could spend a lot of time on that, why don't we just see if there's an interest in diving into any of these other angles for the first little bit here. Julie Marie,
why don't I say one thing?
I do see Julie Marie's hand up, but
okay.
I'll defer to Bill.
Oh, all right. Having gone with a contract processor, and the contract processor is what shut Moo Milk down, I'm not sanguine, or I'm reasonably sanguine about using other people's property, and especially older stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the only caveats I've got.
Okay. Julie Marie.
So my comment was going to be more to frame the conversation, that it might help to kick this off if we thought about what are the goals that we would be trying to achieve in looking at processing. We already have commodity level processing of fluid milk in the Portland area. We have a couple of smaller fluid processors. Our commodity processors feed pasteurized fluid milk to a number of other businesses that do butter, ice cream mix, a variety of different products there as well. We have one moderate scale cheese producer. And then of course we have all the value added that is developed from on farm and at the various scale levels. So with that as the backdrop of what we have, there are just three thoughts I had for when we're talking about expanding processing capacity. And one is that we do a lot of fluid. When you're doing fluid milk, whole milk these days is what is flying off the shelves. Skim milk, not quite so much. And so that does leave a balancing issue that, you know, it might be something for us to consider, looking at some kind of processing that could assist with balancing that milk product, find a home for the skim. We don't have a home for organic milk in the state, a processing home, other than at the small on-farm level. So that's another item to put in the bucket. And then the other thing we might want to look at is we are a very big geographic state, and maybe we have some underserved areas for that are we have farms that have a harder time either getting their milk to a processor or setting up or something along those lines. So those are just 3 things to keep in the back of our mind as we put this conversation into context.
Yeah, thanks, Julie Marie. I think that those are all really good points.
Hi, this is Steve.
Hey, Steve, go ahead, right ahead.
Few thoughts. I think stability is really top of the list on a spot for processing. It would be great to think that there could be a location set up that many farms could utilize, but I don't feel like that could work because you really need a team to manage, and it doesn't make sense for a number of different farms to use and without a team to manage because the individuals don't have time to do that. So there are a couple of places that have done work for other people in whether it's bottling or small situations, but down deep going forward, I'm not sure how stable they are because of either ownership, family situation, or the other situation. It just seems like they change with the way the wind blows. I really wonder if it makes sense for the state to somehow assist the 2 plants in Portland to expand and grow so that it could serve potential needs of the farms in the state. They have been stable, and it would make sense to me to help them grow, and they're stable, and I would think they'd have a good chance of continuing. Anyway, that's a few thoughts.
Great, thank you.
Could I
Other,
address some of Steve's thoughts?
well, let me see. I know you have some things you want to say, Bill. I'm going to get to you. I just want to make sure that we
All right,
hear
I'll hold everything.
okay on the front end. Any other thoughts here?
Julie Marie, kind of coming back around to the organic processing or lack of it. You know, how much organic milk is in the state of Maine? I don't have the ability to see the segments.
We about 7% of the milk we produce, so we're talking about 3 million pounds a month. So it's not an enormous amount of milk.
Okay.
It's a significant amount of it's a significant amount, and it's about a third of the farms.
Do you know where it's located mostly?
All over.
All
It-
over?
Yeah, it's not a whole lot different in geographic location than the conventional.
Okay.
Other than, yeah, you're seeing, more and more the farms that are left are hugging that I-95 general corridor. More. We don't have as many farms on the coast anymore. We don't have as many farms as of late in the far north and the far west.
Okay. And I'm taking notes on my second screen. I am not multitasking, not good at it. So just FYI, when I'm looking to the side, I'm taking notes. So
Great. Other thoughts, and I should have said this up front, we will make time toward the end for any public comment. I do see that there are a few folks on here that are listening in, and we really appreciate that. And so if you have things you'd like to say later on, we'll make time for that.
and then just one comment for Steve on, help with the processors that are in the state. Unfortunately, we're landlocked in Portland. And so we have to operate within the footprint. And I'm from Hood, Steve. I don't know that we formally
Yes,
met,
yeah.
but we're landlocked. So
I was afraid of that. Yeah.
it would be a reconfiguration of the facility in terms of like what we're doing, or if we were to shift processing. But or I guess you always can build up. It's not very efficient, but yeah, just we're kind of stuck. But it's a good
Thank you.
idea.
Annie, go right ahead.
Amanda, let me just tag on to what Rebecca said. Since I spent a lot of time with Oakhurst, Oakhurst is also totally landlocked. And both of those places process at speeds that would dwarf what just the organic people have.
Okay, thanks. And Annie, I think you were next here.
Sure. I think it's important that while we're having this discussion and we're talking about Maine specifically, I think it's important that we also look at what's happening regionally. New England specifically, our processing capacity is for the most part very outdated. And I think if we can think about New England in terms of a region on its own, with a market including Boston, and less about Maine sort of being at the end of the line and supporting ourselves as a, while it's important for our food security, I think we need to include other states and other regions in this discussion, because I think that's the only way to have sort of sustainable processing, is to have it not just be that, we only support Maine milk, but to potentially have it be a place where we could have Vermont milk come to be processed, or New Hampshire milk. And I think that it should be part of the conversation as we have this. And that's how I've been trying to think about this, as I've been, doing this work for too many years now. It's the more we think about it as like we're going it alone as Mainers, the harder it is getting, because we're losing milk supply. And it's a regional issue that we need to collaborate together.
Lee, go right ahead.
Yes, I guess I just wanted to add on to Rebecca's comments. I know from a retailer's perspective, oftentimes when I'm not able to get what I'm ordering for product, we oftentimes hear that it's due to capacity, where production might be an issue, or they have no staffing to actually work the production line. So those are oftentimes concerns for me. So is it, when I think about our current Portland production plants, is it a matter of updating the equipment or figuring out how we support them with staffing? Because that always is oftentimes is what I'm hearing for reasons why we're not able to get the product that we're ordering. And that's not just in Maine either. That's consistent within all of our footprint. And I did want to let the group know, I'm going to be dropping off at 2, so if I disappear, I apologize. It's, I have another obligation that I need to meet, so.
Great. Are there any other thoughts? And we had talked a little bit about the idea of supporting on-farm processing. Do we want to talk about that for a few minutes, just in terms of what would be helpful? Or not helpful? I don't want to pick on anybody, but I do know we have some folks in the room here who have experience with on-farm value-added processing, and that's
Actually, what we're doing, this is Steve again. We had, a number of years ago, we had entertained the idea of building something to do cheese, and at that time we shied away from it because of our staffing, family situation, and not exactly sure who was going to be involved as the years progress at that time. And so we partnered with a group in a neighboring state that if we supply the milk, they make cheese for us. And so we were able to do it that way, and I'm really comfortable because they've done a good job, and it's a stable group. And so I think if you're going to do something like that, you really have to make sure it's not something that they're going to do this year or not do next year, or it has to be, the farmer has to do it themselves. And so I think, in most situations, it would be, if someone wants to go that route, they're probably going to have to have it set so they can plan a way to do it themselves. Unless there happens to be another location that pops up in the state that can do that for a number of different farms. I think it would be a great opportunity for farms to work with somebody like that, but it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be a business that does it for farms, and it has to be a business that can make a profit.
It's a really interesting model. Other thoughts on-farm processing?
Well, something that we talked about a number of meetings, is just the need to for there to be more technical assistance for folks to navigate scaling up on-farm processing. I mean, that's something where we've really struggled, is just, what kinds of equipment, what equipment is best for our operation, making those investments, whether they're through grants or borrowing the money. It can feel real daunting as an on-farm producer to make that leap, and then also have somebody who can kind of help guide you through the regulatory hurdles of if we're going to start shipping grade A dairy products out of state, what is that going to look like then in terms of having federal inspections versus our state inspections? Those have continued to be a barrier for us at the milk house, trying to figure out how to scale, and honestly, it's kind of been it's been a barrier. I'll just leave it at that.
And Andy, would you mind, can you talk a little bit about how have you made these decisions? Like, are there resources that have been helpful to you, or are there areas where it just feels like it's a black hole and it's really hard to get information to make these decisions?
I mean, we've talked with our dairy inspector, but they don't design plants. I mean, that's not really their job. We worked a little bit to designing like the shell of our facility with an engineer from the university, from the engineering program there, but again, not a dairy specific resource. And he had never worked with dairy before. And in terms of buying equipment, like the filler that we bought, we'd talked to farmers, on-farm processors in other states about their experience with various companies and machines, but honestly, kind of felt like a black hole. It's a real niche thing, It's not like it's not a ton of on-farm processors that are mechanized when it comes to processing. And I mean, in the state, there's obviously the main cheese guild, but that's really focused on cheese, So I think that those folks are great for each other, maybe about issues around cheese production. But if we're talking about grade A products, fluid milk or yogurt, cream, it's a real kind of is no one.
That's a really good point as far as the technical assistance. That would be big.
Great.
I just chime in and agree on the technical assistance side. It's been one of the biggest challenges we've had in terms of the scale of the processing we do. I mean, we're at a place where you can get technical assistance to build a really big plant. It's really hard to find good quality assistance for small processors. So that's just been an ongoing challenge, whether it's designing building or the right kind of equipment or any part of the process. One of the things that I think is also a part of the discussion for small on-farm processors. We've got a lot of individual processors, but I think a lot about building a brand and identity for high quality dairy products made in Maine. I think you look at some of our surrounding states. I mean, Vermont in particular, they have a long history of high quality cheese making there, but even the sort of more modern artisanal movement, I mean, they're leaders in that. And their cheesemakers and their cheeses have reputation nationally. And I know we're small, but we're mighty. And I think a lot about how do we, as a group of processors and a group of producers, build that quality reputation and try to grow that regionally. For example, we'd like to start we move a little bit of cheese outside of the state, but how do we build brand awareness for high quality products from Maine, say in the Boston region, or other, larger markets within the region. So I think that's another angle besides just the processing. How do you also build the brand for everybody? I think that's something to consider.
Great. Any other thoughts on this topic before we shift?
Is there anyone in the state that does glass bottles for milk?
I think Smiling Hill and
Harris. Harris Farm.
Harris is, yes.
So I live in Kansas City, and there is a milk company here called Chateau who has really embraced the glass bottle. Lee, I don't know if you have anything on the Hannaford shelves, but they've gone into specialty flavors that are very regional. So when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, and I apologize if anybody's a Philly fan, they did a limited run of something called Eagles Tears where they beat the Philly Eagles. And so like, but you know, I mean, along those lines of New England, like you do something Red Sox theme or various, you know, kind of flavored milks. They have a dreamsicle, cotton candy, coffee flavor, banana, like, and they're all very like rotational, and some of them are all year. If you're looking for a niche New England type product, I mean, you could do a blueberry main milk or just something along those lines. Just an idea.
Okay, great. Well, I think, you know, that what comes out really strongly is that need for technical assistance, and that there's definitely a gap there that we could be thinking more about. Okay. So I guess the next one is just talking about opportunities for new processing. And I know, Bill, you've been giving this a lot of thought. I think everybody knows Bill's background, and that he was he worked really hard to try to make Moo Milk a main brand, a main processor that would be here for a long time. And the challenge was you were trying to build a plane while you were flying it, because it was in response to a
On the way.
unfortunate situation where a lot of farms were losing their contracts but trying to keep them in business. And so I know you learned a lot from that experience, and I think you wanted to share a bit about what you see as potential for new processing.
Well, actually, one of Lee's comments is actually fairly relevant. If you're just looking to get into a couple of supermarkets or a very small trading area, then a small operation is very appropriate. But if you hope to create enough to handle all one set of processors, let's call it the organic processors, then you're really looking at a regional market, just like Lee said. Moo started basically in Maine, rapidly went into Massachusetts, and ultimately spread down as far as New York. But I will say this, that the entire New England marketplace is a right place for the main brand, because Moo paved the way for it. So there is definitely an opportunity along those lines. And then you get to the whole cost of production. And you really have to have a fairly significant plant to have economy as a scale of pushing product through. Even as a single shift operation, you have to be able to break even. And then, because you can always run, most of the milk processors run 24 hours and then shut down for a day or two. So they're able to put out tons and tons of milk. And because of that, they can amortize all of their fixed costs over large volumes, but it's spread over sending products all over New England anyway, and for Hood, all over the nation. So having said that, Moo invested a whole bunch of money in having an entire plant designed. And so I have shared that with the group because I do have a copy of it. And at that point in time, it would have taken 1 year and about $11,500,000 to completely build a plant from scratch, including energy conservation, solar energy, as well as essentially a tourism stop to explain milk processing, as well as show what happens across the processing and the farm actions. So it was a fairly complete plan, and the costs were very well detailed, so we know exactly what is required. And to get back to Steve's comment, we did people that are experts in designing plants and therefore their expertise on what was required was dependent upon it. So having said that, there is the Mool Milk platform, the Mool Milk idea, as well as the ability to at least create a plant that would have the cost breaks needed to compete on a national marketplace for us, which is New England.
Thanks, Bill. And we can talk, in more detail about what you think the right mix is and size and all of that, but thoughts from others in the group, just reactions. I know that there are others in this group who have been working over the past several years to try to look for opportunities for more processing in the state, and you've learned a lot as well. Oh, quiet group today.
Maybe just I'll say something. In my mind, the plant that was envisioned by Moo Milk was basically for Moo Milk. If we were to ever do it again, I would expand the plant size by roughly about 1,600 square feet, which could be subdivided into 2 processing locations with all of the infrastructure in place to have whatever people wanted to manufacture in one of those 2 spaces available to them to move forward at a higher level of processing. So it would not add that much in the cost. What I envisioned, probably maybe 500,000, because you'd have basically an extended building structure and the extension of all the infrastructure in the ceiling into those locations so that whatever was decided to do could be taken care of.
Lee?
Yeah, I just had a question as you guys were speaking about the processing. I guess, and I might even go back to what Julie was kind of bringing up around the problem we're trying to solve. So is it today, so a lot of our farms, are they looking for an outlet for their milk, or are they having a challenge of getting their milk to current processors? So I guess I need to get more clarity around that. So, because I think as I think about, say we come up with a plan and we build more production and there's more products to sell, obviously you need outlets for that. So I'm just trying to truly understand if it's processing, or is it logistics, or needing, the outlets for your milk.
In our situation, what we are doing is trying to create more income from the same amount of milk. In response to Bill's thoughts, I think it's a great idea for a situation like that. But what I do not want to have, I'd be afraid that we'd want to make sure that there was enough milk volume to make that work without taking away from the 2 plants in Portland that are really keeping everyone going now. So that would be my question about that, but
That gets back to your point about stability, Steve. I appreciate that. Other thoughts? Oh, Annie, go right ahead.
Sorry, I kind of have an unstable connection, so I apologize if I get cut off. This was sort of the issue that I kept running into, or that we kept running into with the Maine Organic Milk Company. And just to give everyone sort of a background, Andy and I have been working on building in-state organic processing for the past 6 years or so. And we had envisioned co-packing to start to build our brand, a brand that we developed and, you know, with a lot of research and work put into that, and to start co-packing to build the brand, as I said, and then to launch with the hopes of building a plant at some point after we got traction on the market. And the issue that has always kind of come up is, where's the milk going to come from? And I think the idea of just standing up processing, given the instability of not only the organic market right now, but also the conventional market, is a hard pill for a lot of farmers to swallow. And I think that is contributing to some of the just sort of feelings of misgivings that something like this is going to work or ever would work. And not only because we have 2 fluid plants, or we have, you know, 3 plants essentially that are you know, sustaining the conventional milk supply at the moment, but also I think it's more of a lack of markets. I know for our organic producers, which I am an organic producer, it's that we don't have any options in terms of where we can't, as someone I love dearly loves to say, you can't vote with our feet. So we aren't able to change markets if for instance, our pay price isn't sustainable, which right now for many of our organic producers is not sustainable, but we don't have the option to switch markets because there is not a market to switch to. And so that was basically the impetus behind trying to build a new market. And I think sourcing milk is a much bigger issue because the market is so competitive. And that at the beginning of the conversation, it has to be, where's the milk going to come from? And if we were to build a plant, if we were to build a, you know, $50 million processing plant, which I truly believe we can do that. I know there is the will and there's the way. How are we going to be able to find enough milk to flow through it? How are we going to get farmers to want to ship to this, you know, this plant that we just popped up without a market? And those are sort of the question marks that have been daunting to us as we've been sort of exploring all of these different options. And so I don't know. I think these are the questions.
Rebecca.
So Annie, it's what is the value added product, right, that will bring that market? Is that right? Because you just can't go on with a commodity, like just a standard of identity yogurt or whatnot, right? Because the market's saturated. So what is the value add proposition that allows you to create and grow that market, right?
Yes, but also, yeah, I mean, yes, exactly. But how do you get enough, like how do you build that market? How do you build a plant for that product without having any traction on the market?
Mm-hmm.
You know, without the plant. So we don't have a product yet. We're not making the product yet. It's again, sort of like building the plane as you're flying it.
So, I mean, generally, your point of entry, right, is generally a co-manufacture situation, right, where you have someone make it on your behalf until you figure out whether or not it's got enough traction or legs to go on its own.
Exactly. And one of the main issue in this state is that there's not capacity anywhere to do that. At least that's the challenge we came up with.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts? Seems like a real sort of chicken and egg conundrum.
Everybody's correct. There is no one thing that has to be addressed. Pretty much the entire system has to be addressed. So it's the farmers, and if our desire is to actually find a way for the small farmers to stay in business, as well as maybe increase the number of small farmers, then there has to be a system in place to affect that. And the farmers have to be able to produce a good product with as much cost saving as they can have. It then has to get to the milk processor, and there has to be a milk processor who ideally, with a state-of-the-art facility, can compete with folks that are processing 10 or 100 or 1,000 times more than that processor is. And then finally, if you don't have markets for what you're doing, then it's all to a waste. So everything has to get tied together before you can actually fire the gun and say, let's go.
Additional thoughts on processing? We haven't really talked about, I mean, we have in previous meetings, but I wonder if it's worth sort of revisiting the topic of, you know, what types of processing. It sounds like we're talking about right now, there's been talk that sounds like fluid milk, but are there other products? Are there other opportunities that we could foresee being successful here?
I wonder and this is really off the wall, but I wonder if, thinking about Hood and Oakhurst, they are landlocked. I understand that. And would they consider another location in the state of Maine somewhere? And if they, whether it's to do a whole new setup, and if their business is landlocked and aging, and it really creates a lot of extra work because of that, would it make sense to find another location in the state of Maine that would be have more space, and then they would have the ability to upgrade equipment, which would help, and also have space enough to create other opportunities for other processing. And I know that's a little bit like thinking about Agamark, which is the co-op that a lot of us ship our milk to. And I've thought about, over the last couple of years, conversations with them moving forward and thinking about the different locations that they have, and all the locations, the equipment is aging, and they've had numerous equipment failures, and it costs money to replace it, and it needs to be done. And a lot of the plants were, I think COVID affected this some, but also other times some of the plants have been running 24/7, and that equipment just cannot handle that. And I've wondered at times if it made sense just to close 2 or 3 of the locations and just build one location and eliminate moving stuff from one location to another, and have new equipment. And but it is a big change and a big investment. And but anyway, I don't know if I'm sure they have thought about it, but I just, if they can't expand, if they have thoughts about expanding or upgrading, if they would consider moving to a spot that has more space.
it's a good question, Steve, and I don't know that we have anybody on this call that really can answer that, maybe because
No,
it's
I
sort of-
understand that.
but-
I don't know if anybody has contacts in either business that they could question, but
yeah, or
anyway.
maybe the question for further conversation, not necessarily here today, is, you know, what would it take to make that desirable?
Exactly.
Yeah. Julie Marie, go right ahead.
Thanks. I think, not to put, any process or any individual on the spot, but I think the reality in this consolidated world is that if one of our Portland plants were to make a decision that, they're going to renovate that production line, the likelihood is, if they're talking about a new brick and mortar facility, it's not probably likely that it would remain in Maine, just because with consolidation, things are moving closer to where the population is, in that direction. So, we have to remember that Maine we might be the 5th largest state in Federal Order 1 in the greater Northeast, but we don't match the production capacity of a New York or a Pennsylvania or a California or an Idaho. The choices probably would be, like Annie said, we need to think regionally. We'd have to think about what are the, if we were to push in that direction, the likelihood is we could find, maybe get somebody who could expand and add that, but it is less likely that it would be within the confines of the state of Maine.
Right,
on
I understand.
larger scale. And that's just based on, what's trending in processing and everything around the country.
Other thoughts? Maybe this is a good time for us to invite some public comment, just to see if anyone who's listening in here has perspective they want to share. So I see Jenny, Representative Pluker, Bradley Russell. Any of you would like to chime in, we would welcome that.
The only thing I'd been thinking of as I'm listening, and thank you to everybody for putting the time into this conversation, is we're really looking, part of the angle is looking at how the state can invest public resources in creating some sort of processing opportunities for farmers, which has slightly different bounds and perspectives than purely market-driven finances. And so I think that as I think about it, is exactly what would the number be and how would they best be targeted? Is it possible to come up with a plan where, I'm going to throw out a number, $2 million moved us clearly into a better position for processing Maine milk in the state of Maine, which is just slightly different perspective.
Okay, thank you. Jenny, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I did miss the first part, but I just, building on what Representative Pluker said, I feel that the goal isn't necessarily to come up with a plan and build a plant, but the goal is to find out how best to meet the needs of processing in the state of Maine, which we know is lacking. And is that finding a way to attract investment, to help investment? Who have we done the data? We're all talking in anecdotal we're speaking anecdotally. We're using older data from an older population, I mean, not older, not aged, but from a population that had different needs prior to COVID. What about our current processors? What do they need? Have we asked them? How did the state of Maine attract new industries into older industries such as forest products and developing new products there? And to do that work here in the state, how did we attract the Rue Institute? Are those things successful? Is this work that can be done to find out if it can be based in Maine, or is regional the better way? I mean, it feels like when we're talking about businesses that are looking for food that is sourced locally throughout the region, for congregational feeding sites, for universities, the market is there. There's demand. It's just a matter of making sure that the supply is there. And I don't know that any one state can do it alone in Northern New England. Is it perhaps that the focus should be on finding the funding and the wherewithal to do the research and feasibility of what are those products that are demanded? How can we fill that need? How can we build that need and scale up for that? And I wonder if that should be the focus, because we have some really great partners throughout the region, both our farmers and our processors and our cooperatives and our independents. And I feel like we have a lot of tools and we just haven't put them all together and given them all the support they need to find solutions and to look outside of the boundaries of the state. And I also would caution that we don't look at a particular small segment or particular segment or size of farm to protect. We look at the food system and who is underwriting that and who is supporting that, because I think that's where we get into trouble a lot of times. And I hear it come up every once in a while. So I guess I don't mean to ramble, I'm sorry, but I think there's a lot of data out there, and I'm a big supporter of putting new products on the shelves and finding out how do we do this, because there are people that want our food, and all of us on this call that produce food, we do a really good job of raising some really, really good cows and taking care of the land and feeding the people here in this state. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Any other comments not from task force members? Okay. So where do we go from here?
I think it is a good idea to try to find out what the processor's needs might be if they wanted to process more efficiently and deliver more product. It may not be an easy answer, but maybe there are 2 or 3 things that are consistent with both, or several of them, and it would be nice to know.
Yep. Yeah, and I initially think, we could do some kind of a survey, but I actually think having conversations will probably be more fruitful.
Yeah.
But maybe that, maybe that is something that comes out of, I do feel like there are already some takeaways from this conversation for sure. And, I had said this, I think I said this at the beginning of the first task force meeting, but, as we're talking about ideas, we don't have to settle on just one idea, and if what comes out of us thinking more about processing is we need to know more about X, Y, and Z, that's, I think, a really good outcome, because that will help to inform us and others as we continue to look for ways to strengthen dairy in our state. And, likewise, if there's more than one idea for types of processing that we need in this state, that's, good to surface as well. And I think, the digging in and looking at market opportunity more closely. And I know some folks on this call here have quite a bit of experience with that and have been doing that and do know a bit about what opportunities are out there. And I think that, you know, that work will continue and will be important, but to the degree that we can come up with some sort of a sense of what we want to support happening. If there are things we'd like to see explored in more depth, things we think we should be supporting to have them explored in more depth, those are the kinds of things we can put forth. So I'm just getting the sense that people are thinking, ruminating, and we certainly can have another, oh, thank you, Lee. Lee's gotta hop off. We certainly have time to have another meeting before we reconvene as a full group. And so I think what might be helpful is if we pull together the notes between Miriam and me and get them out to folks, and maybe we can highlight some of the things that we think sound like they could be actionable, or recommendations, which we'll of course take back to the full task force when we do reconvene in October. But giving people a chance to sort of think about the territory we've covered today and plan on having one more meeting before we reconvene as the whole group, if that sounds like a good idea to folks.
Sounds good, Amanda.
Okay. Well, then that means I think we can end now, and you all get an hour back in your day that you probably didn't know you were going to have, but I'm sure you can all find productive things to do with that time. I have no doubt. All right. Well, great. Thank you so much, everyone.
So the next meeting, did you want to have another one of these meetings you said before our next group meeting?
Yeah. Why don't, actually, that's a great point, Steve. Before we let everybody off the hook, why don't we just try to pinpoint a date so that we can all get it on our calendars? And I think we can go a little bit into later in September would be good here, like maybe the week of the 16th. How does that look for folks?
Which week, Amanda?
With week of the 16th or the
Okay.
week after that?
Yeah.
I'll just throw out
The last week in September is preferable.
the last week in September. That would be the week of the 29th or the 30th. Or are you talking about the week before that?
The week before that, the week of the 23rd would be preferable.
Okay.
I'd
I know
concur
we
with
were
that.
hoping to get notes to the full group by the end of the week of the 16th. So if we do move it to next
okay.
week, we should really keep it on the early side, but we'd be pushing it a bit.
Okay. What if we, I'm saying this, I'm not going to be able to be part of that conversation that week, but I'm sure between Jody and Craig, we can, and Miriam, of course, we can figure it out. But what about Monday the 23rd? Same time, say 1 to 3, that works for folks.
I am not available. Sorry.
But Tuesday, 24th.
I'm not on the 24th. Oh, excuse me. Forget I said that. I would be available. Yes.
Okay. Why don't we say for now, Tuesday, the 24th, 1 to 3, and and I will see, we'll come up with a plan for who's going to run that conversation. All right.
Commissioner Beal, if you could just hang back for a second to talk about tomorrow's meeting, that would be great.
That's
Thank
great.
you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you.